Welcome to the Leadership School podcast. I'm your host, leadership and self-care coach, Kyla Cofer. Here at the Leadership School, you'll hear leaders from around the world sharing their stories and expertise on how to lead with balance and integrity. Our goal? Teach you how to be an extraordinary leader. Welcome back, leaders. I am excited to bring back a former guest today, Mitch Gray. So Mitch is a hiring coach and expert. He can help make sure that you get the right person on your team, the right people on your team, the right team in place to really help your company grow and flourish. And so today we talked about more specifically, not just hiring in general, like we talked last time. This time, I wanted to know, when I'm interviewing somebody, how do I make sure that this person's the right person for the job? What are the questions that I ask to make sure it's a good interview? It's a productive interview. How do I get the right people to even apply? And once they do, how do I narrow that pool of candidates? And how do I ask good questions that get me the answers that I need so I can get the right person in place? He had some fantastic advice and thoughts on what this looks like. So this is a really, really important episode, especially for anybody who wants to grow a team of the right people. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast again, Mitch. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Well, it's really nice to see you and catch up. I've been wondering how you are, and I appreciate you being willing to do another one with me. But I wanted to reach out to you again because I was looking to hire somebody to help me in my business, and I ended up not hiring them. It just wasn't the right fit. Although I still keep going back and going, did I make the right decision? Should I have hired that person? I'd be further along if I had. So I thought I really need to have a conversation with Mitch about this because we talked about hiring, but I wanted to talk specifically about the interview process itself. Mm-hmm. How do you post the job? How do you make sure the right things are in the job description? Do you post the salary, not post the salary? Then taking it from, okay, maybe you get 3 applicants, maybe you get 300 applicants. How do you, I have a lot of questions, so I'm going to put them all out here and then we'll just go from there.
Love it. I love it.
If you have only 3 applicants, do you just take those and do you pick one, or do you broaden your search? If you have 300, how do you narrow the pool? And then when you're in an interview, what are the right questions to ask? Because we talked so much last time and our last conversation was so good, but we really talked about, if you hire someone that fits your culture, then you're good to go. Right. And, but what questions do you ask to make that? Because I've heard of companies that have been okay, tell me if you were in a boat and these random weird questions. And I'm what is that even doing? And so I felt really I had all these messages in my head going, ask the right questions. And I just felt really uncomfortable in this interview, even though I've interviewed people before. And so I thought, I just want to hear from you. What, if you could start me and let's just do me, because anybody, this will be relevant to anybody, but from the posting of the job interview, how do you be clear about that to get the right applicants? And then what do you do when you get those applicants? And how do you get the right person in there practically?
Yes. I like it.
Opened up for thoughts.
I like it. I love the idea. I love, of course, I love talking about this because it's definitely something that I think more leaders than will admit struggle with, whether it's a solopreneur, entrepreneur, Fortune 500, HR. And I really see this conversation happening in between the lines with HR people, mostly on social media. And you can just tell by the way they post or by the verbiage they use that many of them haven't necessarily been given clarity on the idealism and the strategy for hiring and recruiting and interviewing.
Yeah. And I've heard that there's even trainings you can take on how to interview people well. And I think I even saw that on TikTok once. It was oh, this person doesn't know how to do an interview. And I go, oh, there's a right way and a wrong way. And then it just really got me to thinking. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, so we'll just start this way. How about that? Maybe you can ask your 40 million questions when you have them, because I know you have. I'm going to back up a little bit. So the question really is, how do you interview properly is kind of where we're going with this. I'm going to back up even more. Before the interview process even begins taking place, you have to have real clarity on who you need and why you need them. What does that mean? The who you need means what type of energy, presence, personality, aptitude, attitude are you looking for in a new team member, a new hire? And that's incredibly important because if you don't know those things in an interview, you can ask all the right questions, but if you're not connecting them to a target, then the responses really don't matter. And that's what I mean by, I would say 70 to 80% of people in hiring positions don't actually have clarity on who they need and why they need them. They are tasked with hiring someone, filling a position, but there's no connectivity there. You've already got a question or a statement.
Well,
Go.
no, like I was just going to say yes, absolutely. Cause I think that's what happened when I was interviewing this person. I'll just tell you the story because it makes it easier for the conversation is, I was thinking I really need an admin assistant. So then the next day I got an email from a virtual assistant company that said, that I've used before. The next day they said, hey, we looked at your profile and this person's looking for a job and we thought they'd be a good fit for you. And I was like, well, that's the next day.
Okay.
So and then I went ahead and interviewed them and I realized I wasn't clear on what I needed and what the job was. And that made it harder for me because I thought, oh, this person's really great and I really like them and they speak Spanish and like all of this stuff. And then I realized, wait, that's not exactly what I need. What I need is 3 people, not just one person. And I kind of figured that out. But it made the interview process really challenging because I was hearing everything that person was skilled at and going, but I need that, but is that what I need now? And so I had to really make those decisions. So I think I'm glad you started there.
Yeah. And it's really important that that's the perfect example. The other side of that perfect example is hiring someone because of their skill set, regardless of their persona. Mm-hmm. And so two major mistakes are often made. We hire someone because of their persona, or we hire someone because of their skill set. Okay. My proposal always is hire on persona first, aptitude, attitude, energy, presence, positivity, whatever that looks like. Measure those first. So you're hiring the person first, then you're hiring the skill set or the job description. And here's my reasoning for that. 90% of jobs in the marketplace can be taught, bought, or certified. Mm-hmm. So let's say you need an admin assistant and you use, let's just throw it out there, you use the Google ecosystem. You don't want to learn all about it. You just want someone who can do it. So you're potentially going to hire someone based on the idea that they understand the Google ecosystem, how to use all the magic tools, et cetera. But you forget to measure the energy, aptitude, attitude, personality. And so you get 3 months into that hire and you're like, shoot, they're great at Google and they've mastered everything I need, but I really don't enjoy working with them. Right. Let's go back to my theory. My theory is you hire the human first. Everything else can be taught, bought, or certified. So if you need someone who's great at the Google ecosystem, you hire based on persona for your team, and then you pay the $500 to train them on the Google ecosystem. That $500 is going to be the greatest investment you can make because you invested in their growth. They know that you value them, and you've hired the right human for your team. And where we get confused so many times is people hire out of desperation. They're like, oh my gosh, my accountant quit and now I need a new accountant. Heaven forbid we worry about team culture, we worry about alignment of personalities, or we worry about passion, desire, etc. And so companies are hiring saying, I need accountants, I need servers, I need waiters, I need bus drivers, I need Google ecosystem people, whatever. Always forgetting that I have to hire the human first because I'm always dealing with the human first. I'm always dealing with the human long before I'm dealing with the job. And so that's why I say you have to know who you need and why you need them. The why isn't the job description. The why is what void on your team as a human are they filling? So your example, solopreneur, small business needing an admin assistant. What are your personality traits? What are not your personality traits? What are things you like dealing with clients with that you don't like dealing with clients with? So now all of a sudden, since you're hiring one team member, you're going to start really dissolving. Here's my traits. Here's what's missing on our 2-person team. So I need to look out for those first. I can buy, certify, and whatever, a train on all the other stuff. And so, especially when you're dealing with a really small team, you have to get the culture right. You have to get the personalities right because you're dealing with each other on a daily basis. If you're dealing with a team of 500, you can afford to make a few more mistakes. But when you're dealing with a small team, it's like you have to get the human right. The job will work itself out.
Yeah. And I remember hearing someone say, make sure you're not hiring for what you need now, but hiring for where you want to go.
Yes.
So like
Yes.
that's what I'm hearing you say is, okay, right now I need someone who can do this, but in 3 months, like that part of my job is going to be obsolete. And now I've got someone who I can't work with or train them to do something else.
Right.
So like if
Right.
I'm focusing more than on, okay, here's the things that I'm great at. I'm like holding my fist up.
Yes.
Here's the things that I'm great at in this hand. Here's the things I'm not great at. And I need someone who I can communicate well with, who fits well with, who understands the goal, the mission, the purpose, who understands what it's like to work with me and doesn't get frustrated with the things that I'm not good at. And I'm not frustrated with that, but like we can talk and communicate that out. Then we can train and work together on some of those smaller tasks.
100%. You want to hire for areas of growth. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like? That looks like, especially when you're a small team or a starting team. What's interesting is I had someone on LinkedIn ask me this very question the other day. They're a solopreneur, potentially looking to hire someone. And a couple of years ago, I was on another podcast with my friend Kent Sanders, and he was hiring an assistant. So we did the same idea. This is really cool. And so when you're looking at that person, it's like, okay, if I hire the human first and they're high aptitude, they're great learners, they have a desire for learning, I'm not worried about the task and the job because I know we're going to be evolving as a business. Mm-hmm. So I'm probably hiring this person as an admin assistant who could potentially become my graphic designer or my number one salesperson or another coach or, whatever that looks like. So what is their aptitude and their passion for learning? Okay. So how do you measure that, Mitch? Here's how you measure it. We're going to get to interview questions. If I'm looking for someone who has a passion for learning, one of the best questions I can ask is, what are your top 5 favorite books?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because if they're a learner, they're a reader. And if they're a reader, they're going to be able to say, my top 5 favorite books are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here's why. By the way, I'm in the middle of a book right now that's changing my life. If I'm looking for a passionate learner, I want to know how many books they're reading. If I'm looking for a creative, I want to know what their artistic outlets are. Hey, what do you do for fun as an artist? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite type of art? If I'm looking for someone who's incredibly organized, hey, what's your favorite program to use? Tell me a time that you had to really organize people inside of some chaos. Like, what did that look like for you? How did you feel? What were you thinking? Did you share it with someone else? So now all of a sudden we're aligning our questions with what we need and who we need. And all of those questions and responses are going to give us measurables to say, that person's great, but they're not really who I'm needing now. But this other person, they love reading, they love learning. They told me about the 3 different programs they learned about last week on YouTube. They take initiative, and I know they're going to be the right person to evolve with my growing team.
So before you even have the interview, before you're putting the job description out there, as you're creating that job description, it sounds like it would be really valuable to know your values. Like, what are you valuing in this person, this employee? Like, what are the top, 4 or 5 things I know I need in this position? What are the things I'm willing to be relaxed on and let go of? And then you can, once you've got your interview pool of people, you can filter those questions based on those values that you've already created. So you're not in the interview going, oh yeah, no, what I need is someone who's operational.
Right. Yeah. And that helps you really start designating the seats in the bus. Right. And what I like to always tell people is, like on LinkedIn the other day when the person asked me if I'm hiring my first person, how do I go through the process? And part of my response was, you go through the process by building your team now and your imagination, so that you have a roadmap for filling in the seats on the bus, right? So we're right seat, right people, right bus. Make sure you've got them placed in the proper spots. So start designing that now within your mind and going, hey, here's the top 4 positions I know I'm going to hire in the next 2 years. Which ones take priority based on my action right now? And so who do I need, persona, aptitude, attitude for that position? Why is this so critical in the beginning? Because you're going to need a right-hand person. You're going to need a person that's really going to have to overcome some of your areas of weakness or amplify your areas of strength. But you call them values. I call it placement and alignment. Yes, they have to align with the overarching umbrella of all that is your culture. And so you should be designing your culture now. That way you have clarity as you're pushing forward with bringing someone on.
So if I wanted to say the two things that I'm thinking of are problem solvers and communication. So how would you ask people to find out their styles in that? Because I don't want to give people like some, Myers-Briggs or personality
Nope.
tests. Like I don't think those are valuable. I want to actually know, like, in this interview, how are you going to communicate with me? Like,
Yeah.
how are you going to communicate with me when I mess up? How are you going to communicate with me when you disagree? Like, when something's really gone wrong? Like, how can you help us move forward?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I've got a million of them. I'm only going to give you a few today, though. It's really interesting because last year I was asked by, I don't know if you've heard of Hiring Our Heroes. So they're our national program for military veterans to transition out, helping them find job placement. Well, under Hiring Our Heroes is another program called Amplify. And Amplify is a national program that works with military spouses to help equip them in the marketplace to find jobs and learn how to leverage their experience. And so, because military people are moving constantly. And so what we forget is the spouses oftentimes have a difficult time finding job placement. So anyway, last year I was asked by Amplify to come in and speak at one of their trainings, and I'm actually going to be doing more of that in the near future. And so my part of this training was interviewing with authenticity, what I call interviewing with authenticity, how to empower your story in the interview. So it was a role switch for me, right? It wasn't giving advice on an interviewer. It was giving advice to interviewees.
Uh-huh.
So I Googled, what are the top 20 questions that people are asking in an interview? And I found it really intriguing because to me, 18 out of the 20 were trash and I would never ask them. And what's funny is about 4 or 5 of them had allusions to Myers-Briggs and other personality tests. Things like, out of the 4, which would you pick that you are? A shark, a lion, a zebra, or an alligator, whatever. And I'm like, well, what if you've never taken that test? Like, that's so an unfair question. Because if you don't understand those, then how are you going to give a good response to that? And we discussed that. Funny thing is, a couple of those people in that, the participants, contacted me a few weeks later and were like, yeah, we did a job interview and they asked us that exact question. So they said they gave the answer that I advised them to give. But anyway, another one that I've heard a lot is, if you're at a karaoke bar, which song are you going to pick if you're at a karaoke bar? And I'm like, that's an asinine question. I don't like karaoke bars, and a lot of people don't. So I'm going to say, well, you're not going to find me at a karaoke bar. And so all of a sudden someone can judge me at, well, you're not fun. You don't participate. You don't. And that's how people are going to view that. So here's the questions you do ask. Don't ask those. I got into another LinkedIn debate with someone about that very question a few weeks ago. So here's the questions you do ask.
That's based on opinion. It's like, what political party do you align with?
Think about it this way. When you interview, you want to put people in situations. Okay, so what does that look like? Mitch, I want problem solvers. Awesome. The question is simple. Tell me about a time that you had to make a really major decision. What was that like for you? What process did you go through? Tell me about a time that you've been in a difficult situation that depended on you. What did that look like for you? What decision did you come to? Did you involve other people? Did you make it on your own? Why did you make that decision in that moment in time? Did it fail? Did it succeed? Did you look at why either one? I'm neutral on the response. What I'm looking for is just a response. And so if you ask someone, tell me about a time that you were put in a situation to make a major decision. Oh my gosh, last year my family and I were moving. Let's just use the military example. My partner was TDY. I had to sell the house on my own. It's just what you go through as a military family. Someone gave us an offer and I just had to make a decision. That is a major decision for a family. And that person said, I'm going to take initiative and make the decision. We've laid out our ground rules of what we'll take. So I negotiated it and we went through with it and I hated it. Okay, why did you hate it? Because it was so much pressure. You know what I mean? Like, you're just kind of what I call pulling the thread. Just because they said they hated it doesn't mean they're negative. It might mean that they have 3 kids who were all toddlers and they didn't have the time to negotiate a $250,000 house. And so now all of a sudden they have empathy. They have compassion. They care for their family. I want someone who has empathy, compassion, and cares for our team, our family at work. I mean, that's how we have to look at this. And so that's a great question. Tell me about a time you were in a situation you had to make an important decision. Tell me about a time that you weren't expected to make a decision or solve a problem, but you did. That's another great question, to put them in a situation to show you that they're actually going to be problem solvers and take initiative. And it could be things like, tell me about, you were the manager of a clothing store. What kind of decisions were you expected to make? What kind of projects did you create that maybe they didn't expect you to create? When did you go above and beyond? Those are the questions that you can ask that will quickly tell you, yes, this is a person that I can dig a little deeper on. That's why I always say if you're a good interviewer, you only need about 3 to 5 questions. Because if you ask the right 3 to 5 questions, you will get all the answers that you need.
And then you guess the follow-up questions in between there. You know, like, tell me 100%. Your story. I hear what you're saying, so explain it. Or tell me, this is my favorite one. Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
Yes.
Because you want them to talk, because in that you're getting to know them and you're asking them to tell a story. And in their storytelling, you're learning the way that they communicate, the way that they talk, the way that they go from point A to point B, and you're just learning about them as people. If you want to be a people first organization, company, or if you want to pay attention to the people that you're working with, and if the people matter, then you're getting to know them and they're building that connection with you too, which will ultimately build more loyalty, right? And more.
That's right. And the question stays the same. You just reshape it depending on what you think you're looking for. So we could ask the same question. You say, I need a problem solver. What if you need, a creative? It's the same question. Tell me about a time that you've been in a situation that you had to be super creative, or that you loved the project that you got to take part in. Did you work with a team? Did you work in isolation? Did you enjoy that? I mean, you're just really, again, pulling the thread on those simple questions and giving them the opportunity, like I taught last year in that Amplify program, to interview with authenticity. Because the one thing you want to find is that authenticity. And that simply comes from asking a question and providing them the space verbally, physically, and energetically to feel safe enough to open up and share those stories. And I think that's where interviewers really miss it. First of all, they often have a piece of paper that they have scripted questions on. Burn that. Second of all, they usually have a piece of paper where they're taking notes. Man, okay, I would rather you pull your phone out and hit record. That way you can give that person your one-on-one attention, or just cognitively work on your memory and make sure you can remember things, either one. But really what they do is they don't create a safe space, even physically, because they're not paying attention. I will never forget. I tell this story often and people think I'm crazy, but it was in 2012. I was looking for a job and I had gone a year without being able to find a job. I had closed my business, couldn't find a job. So I finally got an interview, and needless to say, I needed the money for my family and everything. So I walked into the interview, and I've always been about interviewing with authenticity. And I think it was 10 people on the interview committee, if I remember properly, and they're sitting around a table, and I'm at the head of
Not
one
intimidating
head of the
at all.
No. And so they all have a piece of paper with their scripted questions, and it's one of those deals where they just go around the room and ask a question. And about 5 questions in, I observed that no one was giving me eye contact. When I gave a response, they were all just taking notes. And so in the interview, they asked me about the 4th or 5th question, and I said, I'm going to ask everyone to stop and put your pencils down. And they all kind of looked like, what is going on? And I said, I would appreciate the respect of you actually paying attention to what I'm saying and who I am, rather than taking notes. Because if I give a good interview, you're going to remember the stuff you need to remember without taking notes. So we went to the interview. A few days later, I get a phone call. Hey, Mitch, we're going to offer you the job. And I just have to say, you walked out and everyone was like, okay, we've never had that happen before. And it was actually for a government agency. And the department manager said, we need to hire that guy because he's actually going to take time to connect. And he's actually going to take time to make sure that there's relationships there and take initiative. And so it became a positive. Now, I wouldn't advise everyone to do that. I don't mind doing that. But the whole point of that is I had so many interviews under my belt. I mean, thousands and thousands and thousands, that I knew how to position myself. But I also knew what my ask was. And my ask was, pay attention. Just pay attention to me in this moment. And as an interviewer, you want to give that same respect. Part of that respect is, how do you have clarity going into the interview? And how are you going to ask questions that allow the story to unfold for the person you're interviewing? Because they will tell you the truth. And as Oprah says, when they tell you the truth, you listen. And that'll tell you whether you need to hire them or not.
Wow. And it's nice too, in these questions that you're talking about, is you said that I'm neutral in the response. And that really is nice because it does create this safe space for someone where they're like, oh, what kind of answer are they looking for? It's not that they're looking for the right answer. It's just, is this the right person? And it takes the pressure off, I think, on both sides, because then I know that this person, if I'm the right person in this job, they're going to hire me. And if I'm not, then it's a good thing that I'm not coming in here. And there's no like shame in that at all. It's, we care and we just want to know you. It's not of, well, do you match? Do your skills match on the paper? Do you check off all the boxes? And are you going to be someone that we can abuse later? Like can we work together? Is this mutually beneficial? And so whenever you ask that question, like, or when I ask it when I'm interviewing someone, the response really doesn't matter. It's just in that connection that you're building and in the way that they tell their story. So I started this podcast because I wanted to learn and grow in my leadership journey. And I have been so incredibly inspired by the guests and the conversations. And especially recently with this college tour, I've really learned so much. So once the interview ends, I actually keep the conversation going because I have found that sometimes the richest part of the conversation is when we feel like the interview's over and we can just kind of have a relaxed, more casual conversation. Also, if you've noticed, if you've been following this podcast for some time, I used to ask every guest 2 questions. What does integrity mean to them? And what does balance look like to them? Well, I haven't stopped asking those questions. We're just putting those over on our Patreon page. So go check it out at patreon.com/leadership school. And for $6.50 a month, you can support this podcast. It takes a lot to produce every single episode, and honestly, I could use a little bit of support. So anything that you're able to contribute would really mean a lot to me and would able to help me to continue to bring these high caliber guests in to have conversations on what does it look like to be an extraordinary leader and how do we practically do that. So those conversations are continuing over at patreon.com/leadership school, where I'm asking guests some extra questions, some bonus questions, and you'll get some bonus content over there. So be sure to go check it out. Thanks so much for your support. And thanks so much for subscribing, listening, and sharing this podcast. It really does mean a lot. And I'm so honored to show up here in your podcast feed.
Think of an interview as permission. You're either giving that person permission to tell them to hire you, or you're giving that person permission to tell them to not hire. Mm-hmm. That's all. You're just simply listening to the story. And then you're going, okay, is this human as just a human entity? Are they a type of person I want on my team? If the answer is yes, then you go, okay, are they going to fulfill their role on the team? If the answer is yes, then you hire them. In your situation, you're maybe having to choose out of 3 or 4. So what you're looking for is the greatest value add as a person, not as necessary, unless you have 2 people that are equal. One of them's a little more advanced in their skill, then you can kind of let that override. But I would always hire the human first. So if you have 3 people you're choosing from, okay, who made you feel the best? Who gave you the best energy? Who told the best story? Who did you believe the most? Who gave you the greatest permission to hire them? And if you do that 9 times out of 10, you're going to get it exactly right.
So how do you avoid a bias in that, oh, I just really like this person. They're a lot like me. I connect with them. They look like me. They act like me. We have the same backgrounds, and that bias of like familiarity and comfortableness when you're talking with someone. I mean, I think that just if you're starting with those basic values and you know exactly what you're looking for, that helps if you're being really clear on that to begin with. But it can be really challenging to be in an interview and go, well, do I like this person? Or do I not like this person? You've got like maybe 30 minutes, an hour to make that kind of a decision. And how do you avoid that initial bias of maybe, did this person just tell me what I needed, the right things?
Right. Yeah. So first of all, going back to the similarity, there's a very big difference in understanding value add in connection to your culture versus similarities in who they are compared to you as a leader. So if you're starting out hiring, you almost want to go into the process going, I need to hire someone opposite of me, personality wise, because you really do want that balance. And if you're just having, a mini me, it's going to amplify your areas of weakness and amplify your areas of growth. The problem with that is the gap is going to grow larger. So probably the frustrations that you already have, which is leading you to need to hire someone, those frustrations are only going to grow. And now you're going to have a pointed target of that frustration, which is going to be the person you just hired. So in other words, you're going to have someone to blame other than yourself. And as humans, we usually don't like to blame ourselves. It's just a game we have to play. So I would go into it consciously thinking, if this person has a very similar personality to me, if they have a lot of similar likes and dislikes, if they have a lot of similar areas of strength, then I'm probably not going to bring them on at this point in time, because I know I need balance. Now, if I hire 2 to 3 people that are different than me, then I can bring on kind of a mini me. And that then becomes a mentorship, which is really, really cool. But I would be very sensitive, and it takes a lot of self-honor and self-truth to go, I know who I am, I know what my culture and my values are, and I'm not going to hire me right now. I'm just not, if I walked in the door, I would not hire me right now, even though I think I'm awesome. And so it is a lot of that self-truth to go, okay, I have to hold myself accountable here. Now I'm going to give a freebie. If someone doesn't believe they can do that, then have someone else do the interview for you. Like pull a friend in, pull an experienced partner in, pull someone else in and just go, look, here's what I need. Here's my clarity. Here's my candidates. And I don't feel like I can be very self-trustworthy right now with not hiring myself. So could you give an interview now or be in the interview with me so that I have a sounding board? And that's a great strategy, especially for solopreneurs who are looking to kind of start their team. It just gives them a little bit of a sounding board. And I'll give your listeners maybe another freebie. If there's a few of them out there that are going through the same process and they're going to interview virtually, I mean, I might even give a little bit of my time to be like, yeah, I'll sit in the interview with you virtually and just give you some feedback. That's a no-brainer. Because to have those neutral eyes is really, really important, especially for someone who's never interviewed or hired that often. It is an art, definitely an art.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about like the smaller pools. What if you have 300 applicants? And I'm seeing jobs, I've seen jobs come through like on LinkedIn where like, they're like, how do you measure up to the other 700 applicants? And I'm going, how do they do that? And so, I mean, when you have a pool that big, usually they have some sort of a software that's pulling through resumes and like picking skills and stuff. But how do you narrow that pool? Because really what you've got is maybe like a cover letter and a resume based off of what you put that you needed. And typically the jobs, people are looking at the skill sets, like what skills, what are the required skills? Do I have them? Like maybe I'm just missing one and I can apply like, so that people are applying based on what they think they're capable of. So, how do you narrow that down, especially when you're like, I'm not looking for skill sets, I'm looking for character and culture.
So I'm going to give you my automatic filter. Okay. And I'm going to go back a little bit to how we started this conversation. Now we're getting into recruiting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we began with kind of the interviewing. We've clarified our culture. We've clarified our values. We've clarified some questions we can ask. Now we're getting into recruiting. You obviously need to recruit before you can interview, because if you don't recruit, you don't have anyone to interview. The smaller your team, the more hand selected everyone should be. What does that look like? If I know I need an admin assistant, the first place I'm going to look is within my network. I'm not even going to put a resume or, a job opportunity anywhere except in my mind. And I'm going to go ask, does anyone know a great person looking for an opportunity? Does anyone know a great person looking for an opportunity? If I'm at the grocery store, I'm going to ask the cashier, hey, you're awesome. Your customer service is always great. You know anybody looking for a great opportunity? I'm hiring someone part-time right now. You can find one great person within a 24-hour time span easily, especially if you live in a large populated area. But I think anyone can do that. I could go out within 30 minutes and find 5 people to recruit. So what I'm doing there, the reason that's so important is what I'm doing there is I'm actually controlling the environment. So I no longer have 700 applicants. I'm now saying, I know who I'm looking for. I've seen you in action. I've actually interviewed you before we even do an interview. I've seen your work ethic. I've seen how you engage with other customers. I've seen that, whatever your attitude. And now I can kind of dig a little deeper. And I'm not asking them directly necessarily, but the magic question is, hey, do you know anyone looking for an opportunity? Because the odds are birds of a feather flock together. If they're great at all those things, then they know someone who's great at all those things. And I've done this for about 25 years now, this very technique. And what often happens is they look at you and go, yeah, me, I'm actually looking for an opportunity. And so it kind of becomes this awesome conversation where they've proven themselves to you because you've seen them in action, or they've been referred to you, and now you've created a real opportunity. So my suggestion always is, if you have a team of, I would say 50 or less, you should be hand selecting 90% of those. Easy. If you're going to go out and take the time to do it. So where does that happen? It happens at the grocery store, coffee shops, while you're getting your tires changed, while you're eating out, while you're at church, while you're on podcast. Like, it's happening all the time. Recruiting is a lifestyle. So what we've done is, Mitch, what do we do with the 700 applicants? You get rid of them by hand selecting your team. Okay, that's great. But what if I want to advertise online? Awesome. You share your culture first, not the job description. You share your values second, not the job description. You share about how you value aptitude and lifelong learners and attitude, not the job description. And that becomes your first posting. And so when you share that information and you say, hey, I'm looking for great people, if you know someone that fits this culture, send them my way. What that's going to do automatically is almost remove the people that are just job hunting, because it's making them think. And so you're automatically screening the process by not worrying about the job description and focusing solely on culture, values, and the humanity of it. Because the people that are just job seeking aren't going to respond to that post. It makes them think too much. So my guess is that 700 will automatically go down to 2 or 250. And then you can, relinquish that even more depending on what you want your post thread to look like. But that's where I would begin. I would never post a job listing. And by the way, that's even for Fortune 500s. I think they make a major mistake going, we need an accountant. Okay, but what type of person do you need? Because I've heard the complaint. In fact, I saw on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, someone posted, man, we get 1,100 applications for this one role. So I went and looked at their job listing. It never talks about culture. It never talks about values. It never talks about the type of person they want. It talks about the job. Well, yeah, a lot of people are looking for jobs.
Wow. And what's really interesting is throughout the 3 years of this podcast, I've noticed how we always have themes and we talk about a lot. I've heard over and over and over about company culture and what you're hiring, what you're trying to do. And are you people first culture? Or are you leadership? Are you servant leadership, and all these different things? And so, when you start that way, you can share your mission and what you're trying to do. And you could say, we want people who are excited about serving meals to the homeless, or excited about, creating, bags of chips for Frito-Lay, like whatever it is. But we want people who are excited about this goal that we have. And that will bring people who are excited about that. Because if someone's not, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. And they'll figure out that pretty quickly. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, let's go back to our book analogy, right? We said we want people that are learners, that are passionate about learning. So if that's the case and you're going to post something, why would you not put, do you love reading books? When's the last time you took a college course? When's the last time you took a class? That is automatically going to sift the people that don't really care about learning, but are just looking for a job. Because that's where people miss the tell, right? In poker, there's always a tell. They miss the tell because they never give the interviewee a chance to give their tell. But if you start with, hey, do you love books? Do you love learning? What's your favorite movie? When's the last time you created something? That's going to totally filter out the people that are just looking for a job, because those people don't want to take the time to figure it out. And those are very hard to lie about. Like, you can see through that tell really, really quickly. And so I would be really creative in my approach. My first approach always is to hand select people. I mean, even me, I'm not adding to my team right now, but I'm always keeping a list of people I would recruit, so that when I work with clients, I can be like, hey, you need to go look at this Starbucks. There's 2 baristas that are amazing, and I have a feeling they're about to quit, which I almost get that right every time too, because you can just see by the energy, right? I was at a restaurant, and this waiter, I mean, you could just see the frustration on their face. They're going to quit pretty soon. So if I gave them a great opportunity and they were in the right environment, it might change the game. So I'm always hand selecting, and then I'm always making sure I'm creative on the approach if I'm posting online or posting job descriptions.
And I think it's important to, we're going to wrap up here, but I think it's important to mention diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how from what I'm hearing, it's really easy to incorporate those things in there, because if you're recruiting from everywhere you go, as long as you are being diverse in the places that you go, you can do that, and you can offer those to anybody, and be equitable in the offering and asking and recruiting process. So you're not going and just asking people in your small circle, but go outside that. If you're at the gas station, you can ask anybody. If you're at the restaurant or you hear the table next to you, like, it doesn't matter who they are. Talk and ask anybody.
Yeah, and when we're talking diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're also talking those same elements within personalities. So again, we want diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the obvious things like ethnicity and belief system. I mean, those are kind of the cover of the book, right? But we really, it's possible to hire someone that's another ethnicity than me that is still mirroring me. Mm-hmm. And so you really, again, have to take that self-audit and look around at your team and go, did I hire a bunch of Mitches? Or am I actually hiring, a Kyla here and there, a Sarah, a Sam, a Joseph? Like, am I really balancing this out? And one easy barometer for that is, if you're at the table with your team and everyone agrees with everything you do, you've made a major mistake. Major mistake.
It might feel good, but you're not going to go far.
It might feel good, but it's a major mistake. Yeah. And so if you're at the table and people respectfully and honorably challenge and give problem solving and creativity, and they're coming up with the solutions and ideas, now you've empowered diversity, equity, and inclusion in more ways than just ethnicity, faith, and gender. Because those are, again, kind of the easy. And I think that's where a lot of companies have missed that as well. Is it's like, well, we need diversity, equity, and inclusion. And my first question is, well, what does that look like? Does it look like a bunch of people of different ethnicities, or does it actually look like a bunch of different humans? Again, I'm measuring solely on the humanity of it, bringing different offers to the table. That is when we've really dug deep on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if you dig deep there, the funny thing is ethnicity, faith, gender is all going to work itself out. Because if you're bringing different humans to the table, you're going to be bringing those different cultures and belief systems to the table automatically.
And that is why we talk about this at leadership school, because that is what you do as a leader. And if you can be the person to lead that discussion at a table where it's okay for somebody to disagree with you and you can be comfortable with that, then you are going to be successful, because it's, leadership really requires us to be able to converse with people who are in disagreement, and be able to dialogue and be able to see different perspectives and be able to empower other people to really grow in their own roles, not just to push ourselves forward. So
100%. I want to give you a bonus interview question. I didn't share this earlier. Ready for this?
Yes.
If you were telling me a story about an employee, what would that story be? The kicker is, you're the employee. And that is usually the response. And the reason I love that question is because it makes people go reflective immediately. They're like, ooh, I can tell a story about an employee. Oh, shoot, I'm the employee. And most high aptitude people won't brag on themselves. They'll tell a few positive things, but when you get that reflection and that introspect, that is a huge sign of a really competent, confident, intellectual person that's going to go, oh yeah, let me think about this for a second. So there's your bonus question. That's a great one.
Oh, that's such a good question. That's awesome. Hey, do you happen to have like a list of questions that you offer that we can throw in the show notes? You can say no.
I should totally create that. No, I don't, but I should totally create that.
Well, if you had that, we'll throw in the show notes. But if you ever do, let me know and we'll send it on. We'll share it with the group.
Send it your way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This is great. I really appreciate you coming in, because it was so nice when I had that moment of going, okay, I know there's a better way to go about this. And I ended up, like I said, not hiring that person. And I'm glad now that I didn't, especially after this conversation, because I would have probably been at the same place later and going, okay, was this, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to try and make this work, because I'm like I'm a recovering people pleaser, and I really care about people, and I want to
100%. I get it.
Yes, I can. And, but sometimes you're like, I'm going to have to trust that this person's going to get the right opportunity for them because this isn't going to be it. And, hiring the wrong person can really be detrimental, just especially if you're just trying to help somebody, because it could keep them from doing something that's going to really benefit them in the future. So
100%. 100%. Yep.
Well, anyway,
That's exactly right.
Mitch, thanks so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. If you've liked what you heard and you want some more tools and resources to help you on your journey, go check out kylacofer.com/free stuff.